cannot believe we're already into what I consider is season over. It's the middle of October. I've bored people to death who've ever watched anything I've done in the past about this place, in that as soon as it gets to sort of second week of October it goes quiet. But this October really been funny. We've had a lot of rain, haven't we? So I think that's contributed to fish behaving a bit strangely. I've done what I normally do. I got into a zone and tried to keep it baited. Kept trying. I suppose I said trying then. I don't know whether that's the right word. Since I caught the Jaffa, I was all over the place. You know, it's kind of like you're putting closure on a dream, and then you kind of think, well, where do you go next? And it had the close season, so it shut for a month. And then, funny enough, my good mate Pete had the Jaffa, or Son of Triple Row, not long after it opened, which is a right result for Pete, top bloke, and he'd be well pleased that I've mentioned him on this film. But yeah, so he had that. I didn't find my mojo at all during July, August. Don't get me wrong, it's tough here anyway. It's always a bit, you don't actually see one person that stands out and sort of has a good run of fish. It's kind of like the odd one comes out here, the odd one comes out there. They're not feeding hard, they're picking up bits and pieces. It's a bit warm, the weeds kind of growing, and the naturals are getting more and more apparent. I weren't doing the best I could. But it hit September, and I thought, come on, got to sort yourself out, get yourself going. I was even contemplating whether this is going to be my last year on here. I spoke to a few friends, trying to suss out a few other venues. The hardest thing I find is trying to find somewhere that's got fish of the calibre that they are in this lake, which is just unbelievable. Some of the ones that are coming through, I mean, yeah, you could be here for years and years and years. I think the longest I've ever done on a water is about 8 years, which is a road lake. And that's going back a long time ago. And that's just because it was magic. It was a really special place. Back to September, yes, I started getting my finger out my backside and trying to locate the fish, trying to see if I could get anything going. Did a couple of bits down in the swims that they notoriously kind of group up around, and found myself back into the swim that you're filming me in now, which is called the Social. Now, I don't really like the Social, if I'll be particularly honest, but it does offer you a real big expanse of water with lots of different spots. So the good thing about it is if you get something going and you've got a spot going, you are likely to be able to hold that to yourself without somebody else picking it up, or or working out where you're feeding, because you've got a couple of softer bits, a couple of harder bits, a couple of bits of clay and gravel, all that sort of stuff. There's a good mix of different areas that you can present a bait on. But I did the night over in here early September, and the reason I sort of stayed here is I saw a real big long fish that showed itself in the swim opposite, which is a swim called Fatty Pools. And it was a big fish. It was, and yes, I was in my head. There's a couple I want out of here. One is Darren's Linear, hasn't come out for a long time now. I think we're coming into the third year, and it could be mid-50. And all of a sudden, it was just that one show from that fish that suddenly I'm like, oh hello, I'm suddenly feeling my buzz again, and it was a kick that I really needed. So after that, there was quite a few that were showing, but they were all in the weed. And this swim gives you a pretty good line lay, right up to the dense weed beds that are apparent and that are in there plentiful in front of Fatty Pools opposite me. But the shows I was seeing, I thought I need to get myself over into Fatty. So I went over there and tried to find a couple of bits and pieces over in Fatty's and put a little bit of bait down there, and unbelievably, when I did put some bait down there, the fizzing just erupted about 10 minutes after I stopped, if that actually. And I thought, blimey, that's really positive. And there weren't great spots, and the line lay, they weren't fantastic, but in for a penny, I thought. So the next week I was hoping, you know what you like, you ring in a couple of friends and say, is anyone in there? Is anyone in there? Not doing your watercraft, walking around the lake, no, preconceived ideas. That is kind of like, I do get into that a little bit when it comes into the autumn zones. And I went over there and I got set up late afternoon, felt really, really confident. And then I just, the spots didn't really feel like they'd been turned over. It was like, I was hoping that I was going to get a really nice drop and, 2 drops and everything was going to be great. No, it wasn't. Line they weren't great. Weed was moving around. I gave up the next day. I thought, no, this is just not the one. If your line ain't down, as far as I'm concerned in here, you really are peeing in the wind. And so I decided that I'm going to have to try it from a different angle. I'm going to have to go back into the social and fish it fairly long. I say long, we're talking 60 yards. It's your water, and it was just hitting a sort of halfway point, but it was really nice actually, because the weed was very, very high. So if you went a little bit past that point where I found a couple of zones that are right pushed up against the weed. If you went a little bit too far, you'd hit the weed literally instantly. So as soon as your lead's coming out bank, you're there, and you could pretty much pop it off and it will come down. But there was one particular spot that was a little silt area, and in amongst that silt area was just a tiny hard spot, and to land on it was an absolute bugger. I had to kind of I tried to, it was I was out in the lakes, and there's a couple of bricks out in the lake, so I knew exactly where I'm standing, so I knew where I needed to stand. And I'm marking it out at just shy of 14 wraps. So I'm a wrap out, so I'm 15 wraps out, so as I say, so about 60 yards out. But the only way I could get it to drop right was to cast the rod and to feed the line down, to the tip to fall down, and then kind of break it at that point. So it might sound a bit extreme, but if I paid out another sort of yard of line, I'd hit that weed. So that I'd just clip that weed, and it wasn't happening. So that was the lucky cast. If I could get that bit right, it was great. Now the problem is that work was getting a bit on top of me, and trying to get down early was impossible. So I'd have to come in the dark. So, which is a good thing, because if you're not motivated enough, you're not going to go that extra length and say, and pack the dog up, who's asleep in the back there again, and all your gear, and get to a lake at 8 o'clock at night when you haven't had your dinner, and you've got to set up, and 9 times out of 10 it was peeing it down. But I did that for a few trips, and it wasn't easy to do that cast, I have to admit, but persistence and probably driving everything out of the area, eventually I'd get the drop. And were fish coming out? Yeah, there was a couple of fish coming out around the lake. It was okay. It's just been one of those funny years, really. It's not done loads and loads, and certainly there's been a number of the big fish that have gone on the missing list. John's Linear is another one that a number of people want, including myself. Hasn't showed itself. Darren's, as I mentioned, hasn't showed itself. But then we did have some surprises. The Sanford Common came out, and bizarrely it came out twice in a couple of weeks. We thought that was dead, and it kind of gives you hope. You kind of think, they are in here, they are about. Trying something different. Funny enough, my mate Pete, he was doing exactly the same thing, and I knew he was onto something, and that was pre-soaking the bait. So using the good old freshwater shrimp, which they absolutely love, and I think the Son of Triple Rose only come out on that bait this year, bizarrely. So it's a bait that just doesn't seem to blow on here, and I've done rather well on it. But I was pre-soaking it with lake water, so I'm taking some lake water home, pre-soaking it, because I'm noticing that some of the bites are coming quite late into your session. And one particular time I got my first bite out of here, knowing full well I'm seeing feeding activity, I'm seeing fizzing coming around those weed beds, I'm seeing a few fish poking their heads out, everything was right. You know, you just thought, you know, I'm doing everything that I think is in accordance with getting a bite out of it. And I got my first bite, yeah, again, no strange sort of times, 6:10 in the evening, and not a run, just pulled that, it was the left hand rod, just pulled up tight, but straight away I'm in weed. Yeah, it's absolutely solid. I'm using Gardener's Noir braid, which I always do this time of year. I love my Tiger line, but as soon as it gets to sort of the summer and autumn, when that weed's up, braid for me, and I go right through as well. It's a lifesaver, because it just cuts through that weed and you get a chance of getting them in, whereas I know it ain't going to happen with the fluoro, and I'm going to need a boat, and that ain't easy to come by on here. So fish is in the weed, but I'm gaining on it, pulling and pulling and pulling. Almighty great mother of a weed bed again that's come through. I'm out in the lake, and yeah, and I really hadn't got a clue if anything's on until I get over the top of it, look at the weed, try and move it, and you can see a common is going like that. He's darting around, so I've got to see it, and I just did a lucky scoop with the net, which I wasn't doing very well last year, and this time got the fish straight in there. Unfortunately, was a repeat. I didn't realise it until Mickey Gray told me. He said, "You've had that one before," so he's got better eyesight than I have. But just over 28 pound. It was wonderful to actually get a bite at last. Since a Jaffa, but as I said, I don't know whether I deserved it. You've got to, you know, if you want to catch the buggers out of here, you've got to work it. You've got to work really, really hard, and you've got to want it. And you can't come in here with a, you know, yeah, I'll just go fishing sort of attitude and see what happens. You've got to want it. Yes, so Chufter's Punch left some bait in the swim again. So hoping to get back in there the following week, and yes, I had. You know, normally there's a drama, but I didn't have a drama. Managed to get back in here in the dark, peeing down my rain, and it just didn't stop all weekend. But I left it as late as I possibly could. A mate of mine called Gary was coming down to say hello, and we were going to have a look at a lake round the corner. And so I kind of left the rods out a little bit, because it was just chucking down all day. Just didn't stop. It was just horrendous. We had a river coming through here, and the dogs at the back, but I managed to tuck the ground sheet in properly so that he was dry and he didn't give a flying you know what. Yeah, lo and behold, again I had another one of those funny sort of bites. I've glossed over something because I don't really, because I was absolutely gutted from the day before. The other rod, I had a take on the other rod. This one was actually taking 9. But you know those ones that go really slow? You can almost tell a smaller fish on here. When they just go bang, and they're absolutely screaming. You know full well that it's going to be a pup or a young'un. Oh, say a pup or a young'un. It's still, you know, they're generally pretty big in here. But when you get one of those slow building takes, you think, oh hello, that could be a proper one. But I was into it, and as soon as I was into it, I was out of it. So I glossed over it a little bit there. But yeah, so when I had the take on the left-hand rod, it was very similar to the last one, but it was in torrential rain, which is, I could count on my hands the amount of people I know that have had a take in torrential rain. Me certainly. I think I can't really remember whether I ever have. My memory's terrible anyway. But anyway, yeah. So another fish that's got his head in the weed. So you can't sort of say it's going to be a fight or anything, because it's not going to do anything because its head's covered. So easily in the net, but what a fish it was, an absolute stunner. One of the ones I hadn't seen before on the bank went 34.10. As you can see, it's just, they're just colours. And it's that point that I kind of thought, you really want to leave here? There's got to be another season in it. It has to be another season in it. And you know, that was further confirmed when Jason, who's fishing sort of 2 o'clock to me, fishing a swim he loves, that weekend it dried up. It got nice, you know, and I just had that feeling that it's going to do a few bites. And the other reason as well is, funny enough, Miles Gibson down in the other end of the lake, he had triple row, 3 years and a day apart from when I had it, literally exactly the same weight, looking similar with that sort of beautiful autumnal glow that she does at this time of year. But normally when triple comes out, it's kind of like, you know, it's not going to do much more after that. And a couple of fish came out, and I'd had my little flurry, and Jason, what a result he had. I'll leave him to tell the story, but he had a new 40 linear for this lake. Now, you know what this complex is like for linears. Simon Bartlam's brought on some of the best and finest linears, and who knows, in the near future we could have a British record that's one of his linears. They're going that big. And then he followed it up by one that was on the missing list again, that I thought was a goner, which is 3D. Which went similar sort of weight to what it has done, I think, actually, 37.8, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. But since then, I think it's happened. I think Miles is catching a couple still. He works it very, very hard. I don't know of anything significant, but it's got very, very difficult. And yeah, how long I'll last, I don't know. You've got to be motivated, you've got to keep at it, and I am persisting in the same swim. I have seen one this morning that showed about 20 yards past me, which is like brilliant. That means it's still in that sort of weed area. I mean, they're moving far, but not seeing that heavy feeding activity or any sign that's going to happen. So I think you're going to get the odd one that's going to come out now, literally until, dare I say it, March. Sounds depressing, doesn't it? But we've worked out it's kind of like 3 to 3.5, 4 months of fishing you get out of this lake a year, really. You know, you lose a month because once they start spawning, rightly so, as I said before. So you lose a month, and then when you come back from that spawning session, it's generally quite quiet. And it's September and October, half of October. And you know, one could argue that it's just a week of October at the moment, and then you get a bit of March and a bit of April into May, and that's about your lot. So see what happens after this. But yeah, I'm doing an autumn film now, and you think, well, it's middle of October, mate. Sure, you got time to go, but I suppose, you know, who knows? Might get lucky, but it'll be against the trend of what's happened for the last 6 years. So into winter, not sure what I'm going to do yet. A couple of plans have gone in a different direction. So I'm gonna drag it out a little bit on here, see what happens, and hope to bag a winter bagger. I'm gonna bag a winter whacker. That's the plan.